The engagement announcement hit my inbox like a thunderclap. Madison Hayes, 22 years old, whole life ahead of her, about to walk into the same trap that had caught 4 women before her. I tucked the photo into my wallet behind my old student ID, the one from before I became Mrs. Whitmore, when I still had my own name, my own dreams. The next morning, I made the first withdrawal, $8,000 from our joint checking. Enough to look like furniture shopping, not enough to trigger Ashton's attention. The teller didn't even blink. Mrs. Whitmore buying expensive things was routine, as predictable as morning coffee. I converted the cash through 3 different banks, then deposited it into Phantom Rose Holdings in Connecticut. Patricia had shown me how to make it look like interior design consulting fees. The IRS loves documentation, she said, even if it's fiction, as long as it's properly filed. That evening, Ashton came home at 9 instead of his usual 7. His tie was loose, jacket off, scotch on his breath. Lost the Morrison account today, he announced, draining half his glass in one gulp. Compliance concerns, ridiculous. I kept my face neutral, though I knew Margaret had sent tips to Morrison weeks ago. The next day, I moved $12,000. The day after, I booked 15 spa treatments. The teller at the 5th bank asked, curious, "Your husband wants you to pamper yourself?" I smiled, playing along. He thinks I deserve it. Ashton's drinking escalated with every client who pulled funds, every rumor of federal investigations, every partner asking questions. He'd stand in his study, speakerphone on, pacing and drinking, signing whatever I brought him without reading. Power of attorney adjustments, insurance modifications, trust amendments. His signature grew sloppier by the day. Thursday morning, Patricia called from a number I didn't recognize. "Can you meet today? Urgent." I found her at a rest stop on I-95. She looked like any suburban lawyer in a sensible Honda, except for the tension in her shoulders. "The FBI contacted me," she said without preamble. "They know I represent you. They want to talk." My chest tightened. Richard Whitmore had been under investigation for 18 months. A former employee had filed a whistleblower complaint. They'd been building a case, but they needed someone with inside access to corroborate. Patricia handed me a card. Agent Sarah Coleman. They specifically asked for you. That night, I watched Ashton pour his 6th drink before dinner. Calls came nonstop. Lawyers, crisis managers, partners. Each one made him drink more, sign more. I suggested he eat something. He muttered, "Not hungry," eyes red-shot. "You've been different lately," he said. Calmer. "Therapy," I lied smoothly, learning to accept what I couldn't change. Saturday, the Riverside Country Club, ladies' auxiliary meeting. Helen Brennan and her coterie of wives who had made sport of diminishing me for 4 years were there. Margaret stood in the corner, pouring tea, invisible as wallpaper. Our eyes met briefly, almost imperceptibly. Helen began before I even sat. "Mila, darling, still playing with your little investment apps, so cute when wives have hobbies like children with toy kitchens." I leaned forward. "Actually, Helen, my portfolio is up 340% this year. How's yours doing?" The room froze. Helen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. 340%? She stammered. "Would you like to see the statements?" "I particularly enjoyed shorting your husband's pharmaceutical company last month. Made a killing when their patent got rejected. You did know about the patent rejection, right?" Helen went white. Around the room, the other wives leaned forward, seeing me as something other than a pretty accessory. Margaret smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly, tea in hand. By evening, Ashton would hear about this. By morning, Richard would know his daughter-in-law had claws. But I didn't care. The timer was running down, and I was tired of being underestimated. Wednesday, the explosion began. Diana filed for divorce from Nathan, bringing receipts. Infidelity, financial fraud, hidden accounts, a damning email trail where Nathan plotted against her. Ashton called 17 times in an hour. I answered the 18th. I said nothing. Diana had fought her own battle. The empire was cracking. I retrieved the red wig I had bought with cash weeks ago. The polyester dress from Target, dark sunglasses. Nobody. Anyone. Someone who didn't exist in the Whitmore world. Nathan Chin's office on Madison Avenue. I knew the guard's schedule, the assistant's lunch break, every detail. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt endless. In my purse, a manila envelope held screenshots of every message Ashton had sent about Nathan. Mockery, contempt, detailed plans to steal clients after the partnership dissolved. I slipped the envelope under the office door, swish across the Persian rug, walked back down as though invisible. 3 hours later, Patricia forwarded an email. Partnership dissolution letter received from Nathan. Emergency meeting requested. The war had quietly begun. Engagement announcement expected within 6 months. Margaret's eyes held 4 decades of rage compressed into laser focus. She's the next you unless we stop them now. I felt that weight pressing into my chest as I left the library. Madison Hayes' photo burning against my leg inside my wallet. 22 years old, innocent and bright-eyed, about to walk into the same trap that had consumed 4 women before her. I pressed my fingers against the edge of the picture, tracing her smile, trying to imagine what I would say if I could warn her. But warning alone was not enough. I had to act. The next morning, I initiated the first withdrawal, $8,000 from my joint account. Enough to look like casual spending, furniture, a little decor, but not enough to trigger suspicion. The teller barely glanced at me. I'd become invisible in my own life, the quiet, compliant Mrs. Whitmore, predictable and unremarkable. I converted the money into cash at 3 separate banks, each transaction deliberate, precise, untraceable. The funds moved seamlessly into Phantom Rose Holdings, a shell company in Connecticut, disguised as consulting fees for a design business that never existed. Patricia had taught me that paperwork could be a shield if done right. The IRS loves documentation, she said, even if it's fiction, as long as it's meticulous. That evening, Ashton staggered in at 9 instead of 7. His tie was loosened, jacket off, scotch already on his breath. Lost the Morrison account today, he announced, as if it were a badge of shame. $40 million in assets gone, compliance concerns, ridiculous. I kept my face calm, neutral, watching him drain half the glass in a single swallow. I knew Margaret had planted the seeds 2 weeks ago, tipping off Morrison's compliance officer. I moved $12,000 the next day, 15 spa treatments the day after. Your husband wants you to pamper yourself? The teller asked at the 5th bank. I smiled, the practiced ease of a woman hiding a hurricane beneath the surface. He does, I said lightly. The truth was far darker. I was preparing for the war I had long promised myself I would wage. Ashton's drinking escalated. Every day brought another crisis. Another client pulled out, another partner asked questions. Rumors of SEC investigations swirled, and he couldn't control them. He stood in his study on speakerphone, pacing, signing anything I brought him, oblivious to the storm I was orchestrating behind the calm facade of my teacups and idle smiles. His handwriting became sloppy, evidence of a man losing control, and I watched it with detached fascination. Thursday morning, Patricia called from a number I didn't recognize. Can you meet today? Urgent. At a rest stop on I-95, I found her sitting in her Honda, professional and understated. Her shoulders were tense, the decades of experience she carried compressed into the lines of her jaw. The FBI contacted me, she said without preamble. They know you represent me. They want to talk. My chest constricted. Richard Whitmore had been under investigation for 18 months. A former employee had filed a whistleblower complaint, and the case had been building quietly. But they needed someone with inside access, someone who could corroborate. Patricia handed me a business card. Agent Sarah Coleman. They specifically asked for you. That night, I watched Ashton pour his 6th drink before dinner. Calls, emails, text messages, each one poured like gasoline onto a fire he could no longer control. I suggested he eat something. He muttered, bloodshot eyes unfocused, not hungry. You've been different, he said. Calmer, I lied smoothly. Therapy. I had learned to accept what I couldn't change and focus only on what I could control. Saturday arrived with the monthly ladies' auxiliary meeting at Riverside Country Club. Helen Brennan was there, along with her coterie of wives who had spent 4 years diminishing me at every turn. Margaret stood in the corner, tea in hand, almost invisible, but her gaze found mine steady, piercing. Our eyes met for the briefest fraction of a second, and I felt a pulse of reassurance. Helen began before I even sat down. Mila, darling, still playing with your little investment apps? So cute when wives have hobbies like children with toy kitchens. I leaned forward. Actually, Helen, my portfolio was up 340% this year. How's yours doing? Silence descended like a guillotine. Helen's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. 340%? She stammered. Would you like to see the statements? I asked lightly, savoring the moment. I particularly enjoyed shorting your husband's pharmaceutical company last month. Made a killing when their patent got rejected. You did know about the patent rejection, right? Helen went pale. Around the room, the other wives leaned in. Suddenly, I was no longer the decorative accessory. Margaret's faint smile was the only acknowledgement I needed. By evening, Ashton would hear about this. By morning, Richard would know that his daughter-in-law had claws. But I did not care. The timer was counting down, and I was tired of being underestimated. The explosion began on Wednesday. Diana filed for divorce from Nathan, bringing receipts, infidelity, financial fraud, hidden accounts, a damning email trail. Ashton called 17 times in an hour. I answered the 18th and said nothing. Diana had fought her own battle. Nathan had underestimated every woman in his orbit. The empire was cracking. I retrieved the red wig I had bought weeks ago with cash, the polyester dress from Target, dark sunglasses. Nobody. Anyone. Someone who did not exist in the Whitmore world. Nathan Chin's office on Madison Avenue. I knew the schedule of the guards, the assistants' lunch breaks, the building's rhythms. In my purse, a manila envelope held screenshots of every message Ashton had sent about Nathan. Mockery, contempt, detailed plans to steal clients after the partnership dissolved. I slipped the envelope under the office door, whispered across the Persian rug, walked back down as though invisible. 3 hours later, Margaret forwarded an email. Partnership dissolution letter received from Nathan Chin. Emergency meeting requested. The war had begun quietly, surgically, without fanfare. I registered at the Warwick Hotel under my maiden name, Mila Hawthorne, Armor. Identity reclaimed. The room was small, sterile, functional, but mine. Laptop on the desk, burner phone at the ready, SEC whistleblower hotline dialed. Automated system first, then a human voice. Securities and Exchange Commission, Enforcement Division. I need to report systematic insider trading at Whitmore Capital Management, I said, my voice steady. 5 years of documented evidence, including time-stamped trades aligned with material, non-public information. The agent listened, asking precise, technical questions that revealed full comprehension. I laid it out. Richard's lunches with executives, followed by Ashton's time trades, the shell companies, offshore accounts, patterns so clear a child could follow. Why now, Mrs. Whitmore? I looked out at the Manhattan skyline. Because staying silent makes me complicit, and because they plan to trap another woman in the same cycle I escaped. After the call, I copied Margaret's 40 years of evidence onto 3 separate drives, one in a safety deposit box at Chase, one at Bank of America, one in Patricia's office safe. Instructions: if anything happens to me, release everything to the FBI, SEC, and New York Times simultaneously. That evening, Richard Whitmore arrived. I watched from the penthouse window as he emerged from his black Mercedes, face tight with fear and fury. He didn't bother with the doorman. Privilege. Ownership. His son's fund, 30% at his fingertips. Where are your books? His voice carried before he even reached the study. I moved through the kitchen, making coffee, small gestures, perfect normalcy. My phone recorded every word. They worked until 2 a.m. Papers scattered like tarot cards. Ashton passed out in his chair. Evidence of a crumbling empire, a financial genius reduced to exhaustion. I moved through the penthouse clinically, leaving my clothes, jewelry, and blood diamonds untouched. Laptop, burner phone, banking info, all in my purse. Keys lined on the granite counter with military precision. A note: check your accounts. The October air hit my face as I stepped onto the street. Behind me, 23 floors up, Ashton slept. In 6 hours, he would wake to empty accounts, FBI closing in. Breakfast in the Warwick Hotel, eggs Benedict, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Calm. I logged into our joint accounts. At 7 a.m., automatic transfers triggered. $17 million redistributed legally. Prenup had protected my rights, not him. By 7:15, Ashton had called 9 times. I let it ring. First message: Mila, what's happening? Bank says error. By noon, the 47th call: lawyer. I hung up, blocked the number, called Patricia. They're panicking, she said, voice smiling. Completely legal, full rights. By the time he contests, he'll have bigger problems. Evening news. Richard Whitmore led in handcuffs from his Westchester mansion. 4 decades of crime, meticulously documented, finally catching up. Margaret sent a single champagne emoji. Silent triumph. 3 weeks later, strange peace. Nathan fled to Switzerland. Graham Chen pled guilty. Other partners turned evidence. Then Ashton appeared at the Ritz-Carlton bar. Hollow-eyed, unshaven. You destroyed everything, he said. I sipped champagne, held his gaze. No, I returned balance. You built a house of cards. I merely watched it fall. He reached for my wrist, fingers closing in air. Security removed him. 2 days later, Diana and I testified, independently but in harmony. Margaret's testimony spanned 3 days, 4 decades of corruption, evidence precise and damning. The final divorce decree arrived. House, assets, personal property, mine. Signature: Mila Hawthorne. Identity reclaimed, freedom secured. The Phoenix Foundation was born. Margaret and I transformed Ashton's ashes into purpose. Jennifer Chin, Elena, Caroline, the women who had suffered under men like Ashton, found allies. Madison Hayes passed by, unharmed, walking toward her future. Ready for round 2? Margaret asked. I was born ready, I said. Keys, heavy with purpose, opened doors to life and freedom. I merged into traffic, heading home, my real home.